there will be other competing outside factors that will affect your relationship. Like you have an issue with your partner, the first thing you do, you run to your friends, you run to your sisters, you run to your peers to get advice.
We have weak men out there, and there are men who are weak in all areas. So probably talking to somebody else about your sexual experiences in bed might have been their way of getting the other woman. I don't know. So I will not sit and defend that.
Masculinity is the nature of a man. Do we create nature?
Even as we say that the boy child is under siege, we need to ask ourselves, how have we brought up this boy child that we're talking about? Is it the Kababa generation? As long as it's the Kababa generation, we will always have problems.
Good evening. Always a pleasure to join you. My name is Likuyani Eli, and tonight, being a Tuesday, it is where we discuss main issues, and not so far from what concern all of us is the mental health of men in our society. So remember, the hashtag is Heart in Heart, and of course, do share the link to each and everyone that is joining so that we can be able to discuss this animal in the room, or the elephant in the room, which we call mental health. Yes, today is Tuesday for those who have no idea, including my guests. And first and foremost, allow me to bring you on stage. This is James Mwati, psychologist based in Nairobi. Good evening, James.
Good evening, Eli. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well. Pleasure to be here as always.
Pleasure to see you, James. Yes, how is Nairobi so far?
Nairobi is good. A bit hot, not a bit, quite hot and dusty, but we expect rains anytime soon.
That's great. I hope those rains gonna chill out our nerves, because apparently men are suffering in silence. Allow me to bring in Gilbert, the other man that is on the stage tonight. Good evening, Gilbert, and how are you tonight? Rather, good afternoon to you, Gilbert.
Good afternoon, Eli. Thank you for this opportunity. Hi, our listeners. It's a pleasure being here every Tuesday at this time. We are doing good. The sun is shining bright outside. At least the eyes.
What time is there exactly, and which city are you in, or state?
It's 12:30.
Yeah.
Noon. I'm in Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Great. It's a pleasure to have you, sir. And somebody else decided to bump into the men's section, and I'm asking myself, why on earth will a relationship coach be here tonight? Good evening, Yokabi. How are you?
Good evening, Lukuyani. My apologies. I know today was Wednesday.
Don't worry. You just decided to forward the calendar, but you are invited. You're invited. Remember. I mean, you will never lack something to say, because apparently I'm told when relationship goes south, men do suffer, and some of them will suffer in silence, and others will express it with their actions, which sometimes could be damaging. So we're going to find out when we get to that side of the bridge. But first things first, James, what is mental health?
Thank you, Eli. Mental health is a broad and a complicated term that could mean a lot of things. But in general, mental health is the total well-being of an individual. Noting the term total, that means, unlike what most people think and concentrate on just the mind and the brain, mental health encompasses emotional intelligence. It encompasses physical wellness. It encompasses biological wellness. So it's a totality of wholeness. Yeah. When most people hear mental health, they immediately go into mental disorders. The first thought that comes into their mind is mental disorders. But the term mental health on its own means total wellness, in short, total wellness.
Total wellness. Gilbert, how do you capture this?
As James was said, thank you, James, for that. As he said, mental health is the state of well-being of someone, which is characterized by ability to to be present emotionally, ability to express and manage your emotion, to sustain positive relationships with others, and ability to handle change positively.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Nyoka Bikmao, let me just ask you this on the flip side, because is it necessary to have this discussion, especially that men apparently, I'm told, seem to be victims of mental unhealthiness, if I can say like that? Do you see that in relationships? Nyoka?
Yes. We see that a lot because I think men are accustomed to not being in tune with their emotions. They are accustomed to not being aware that it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to feel a certain way. And part of the major causes of mental illness or mental unwellness is emotional instability. The state of your emotions determine how you behave, how your moods are, how you react to things, how easily irritable you are, how rational and reasonable you are about things. So emotions are a very key role to the state of your mind. And as a relationship coach, or from a relationship perspective, men are not in tune with these things. They think it's a weakness to be in tune with your emotions. They think it's less masculine to be in tune with your emotions. And that's why you're seeing in our country right now in Kenya, men are just getting angry and killing the wife and killing the children because things are getting out of hand and they don't know what to do and they don't know how to seek help. And the other thing about mental illness and emotions is that men don't talk to each other. You don't share your innermost fears because you're afraid of coming across as weak. And then men also are not trustworthy. A man cannot trust you with his emotions because you'll go telling other people, oh, he's a crybaby, So you can't trust another man with your emotions. Unlike women, you see, women, for us, emotions, we deal with them every day. Ukinikasirisha kidogo hivi Lukuyani, I'm calling somebody about it. And I have every girlfriend for every kind of emotion, every state. Yeah. Their mind. Because immediately something happens like this that's disturbing, I've run to somebody in particular who gets it, and I can rant, I can vent, I can complain, and I deal. In the process, I end up dealing with what is affecting me. But men, kunyamaza hivi kama maji kwa mtungi. They don't say a single thing, even when they lose their parents. Jikaze, my father has died, and he tells his friends like it's a birthday party. My father has died, and during the burial, he's standing there with his chest up. So that's one of the major reasons why men experience a lot of mental illness or mental challenges. And let's call it illness, Lukuyani. Let's not sugarcoat it because it's a disease. It's a disease that is really effective when not dealt with, and it can be quite dangerous. So let's call it an illness for today because the relationship coach has showed up.
James Mwathi, do you agree with what Nyokabi is saying? Because Nyokabi says women will talk out. On the other hand, men will hold in their feelings and decide to show their stone face. Kwa sababu mwanaume ni kujikaza.
Nyokabi wants to run us out of town immediately. She comes in and wants us to. I agree with most of what Nyokabi says. But I would want to bring in another context to it all. No man shows up and decides, I will hold on my emotions. No man shows up and decides, I will not let out what I'm feeling. We need to understand the role of socialization in all this process. Because if we go to the root of men have decided, then it becomes, or it looks like it's the fault of the man. And this is one of the major problems that we experience, because through socialization, we are taught that a man is a problem solver. Yeah, a man is a protector. A man needs to be macho. That is what is inculcated in us growing up. I like the generation that's coming up that's telling their kids that it is okay to cry, it is okay to let out feelings, it is okay to all those things. But we can't negate the fact that the way we have been socialized, it makes it very difficult for a man to go out there and pour their heart. Yeah. And I agree with Nyokabi completely. This is one of the major reasons why we are seeing more mental health issues with men. So I think it's just the context that I would want to bring out rather than put a blanket face to it and say that men have decided. It's a socialization aspect. That's number one. Number two, I would completely disagree with her when she says men are not trustworthy. And that's why we do not go out and talk to other men.
Okay, again, and I think Gilbert also is agreeing to that.
that one I will completely refuse. It's not about trustworthiness. Yeah. If anything, I would be, as a man, I would be more afraid to talk to a lady about my issues than to a fellow man. Because by nature, men keep secrets, quote unquote, or more stuff to themselves, unlike women who have who are more likely to share, and Nyokabi confirms to us, with their fellow girlfriends, because they have a girlfriend for every occasion. If you think your man is not tall enough, you have a girlfriend to confirm that or deny that. If you think your boyfriend is a bit stingy, you have a girlfriend to confirm. So there are all these clusters that we men do not have. So it's not about trustworthiness, but it's about, again, socialization and just the way we've been taught to be men. And then number three, to just respond to what Nyokabi says, I would be a bit hesitant to, although she has, I'm 50-50 here. She said for today, just for today, we call it mental illness. But I would have a problem with terming mental health or clustering it all as an illness. Why do I say this? Number one, we need to understand the society we are coming from, where there is a lot of stigma when it comes to any issues relating to mental health disorders. Yeah. Now, and we know that mental health disorders are a spectrum. Yeah. You can have, for example, anxiety that you can deal with by talking to somebody, or little anxiety is good because it spurs you on. But also in that spectrum, you can have an anxiety disorder that halts you on your steps. Yeah. So terming the whole spectrum as an illness, I would have a problem with that. I think that
you will have a problem with that. Thank you. Let me just get Gilbert first to give his remarks, because he's been sitting there pensively waiting to jump in. Gilbert.
Thank you, Eli. First of all, let me reiterate by saying mental health is the state of well-being. First of all, when this well-being has been interfered with, or there is a challenge, that's when you fall into a state of mental illness.
Yeah.
And mental illness is medically diagnosable illness that leads to one's cognitive impairment. Let's get that. It renders you to be emotionally or relationally enabled. And these, it can be as a result of biological nature, it can be developmental problem, it can be a physiological problem, which can be preventable, it can be diagnosable, it can be treatable, it can be rehabilitated. So when we choose to base on one factor and forget that it's a whole spectrum of events, we miss the point. So we'll keep on addressing one thing. There are those that biological. There are those that come as a result of developmental or issues. There are those that come as a result of psychosocial factors.
Yeah.
So we need to categorize. We are discussing this from which perspective, or else we generalize everything and then we send out a notion that this is what mental health is. And all of us can agree it's a state of well-being. But when one factor has been tied, because we can address depression, we can address anxiety without forgetting the developmental or biological, like schizophrenia, bipolar. Those are mental illness, some which are beyond our control, some which need to be diagnosed, which can be treated, some can be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
So it just depends from which angle are we approaching the mental health issue before we even narrow down to men, because this a whole blanket, it covers like all of us, even women go through this. Yeah. So it's not just about men, but before we reach there at men, we must get the picture clearly from the top that this is how it develops going down. Because some of them we might put a fallacy of generalization that men don't do this. But how? Tell me how someone with bipolar, which has not been diagnosed, can control themselves. Tell me how someone with schizophrenia, which has not been discovered, know even what they are suffering from. They have
what did you say? Schizophrenia? Is this a disorder of listening? Schizophrenia, unaskiza. These people are laughing at me, but I really want to, because any guy out there who is watching and schizophrenia, I don't know what it is, but probably James is here and Yokabi, they will help us to actually understand what is schizophrenia. So, Gilbert, allow me to just bring in James first and then Yokabi. Yokabi, I know you have a point to bring out, but James, what is schizophrenia? And is this a common kind of illness you see in the patients that you actually diagnose and help out?
You're skipping Yokabi. She's itching to go. I can see.
No, I know
anyway,
schizophrenia. I know where I'll lay Yokabi at.
Schizophrenia is one of the most complicated mental disorders. Yeah, amongst the different types of mental disorders that we deal with, I think schizophrenia is the most complicated. Schizophrenia is characterized by mainly two major symptoms. Number one, hallucinations, and number two, delusions. Now, the hallucinations are again subdivided into three broad or narrower categories. Number one, audio hallucinations. That's where the patient hears things that are not there. Number two, visual hallucination, where they see things that are not there. Back to audio. When one is having audio hallucinations, and I'm sure most of our viewers and listeners have seen this, they will look like they're talking to themselves. I'm sure you've all seen those people who we use the term that I don't like. I cringe whenever I hear this term, mad people. It's a very stigmatizing term, but for purposes of understanding, when you see a mad person, and I use mad very sparingly, you will see you might have seen somebody talking to themselves. What in actuality is happening is they're not talking to themselves. They are conversing with voices that they can hear, which other people cannot hear. And that's what is termed as auditory hallucinations. Then there's the visual. You will see somebody cringe. They are being fought by things that somebody else cannot see and all that. And then
this is what we call demons in schools, because sorry to interrupt you, but we've had cases of being reported in the media. Demons have gone to a particular school in the coastal region, another one, I don't know, in the Kombani region. Is this something, or is this more than we hear actually, James?
Just to answer that briefly, I would be careful not to put a blanket again. I'm usually very careful not to put because what you described and what has been happening in most schools is what we call mass hysteria. Yeah.
Mass hysteria. Okay.
Yeah, and psychologically, there is the notion that when an event is broadcast enough times, there is believability at the psychological level, such that even the people who are not exposed start experiencing the symptoms. So that is a totally different angle than a visual or audio hallucination. The third type, before I forget, the third type of hallucination, because you asked me specifically about schizophrenia, that type of hallucination is what we call tactile hallucination. Now, the tactile hallucinations, tactile. Now, the tactile hallucination, somebody will feel as if things are crawling over their body. So you'll find somebody scratching, they're feeling like worms or things are eating at their body, but actually it's a hallucination. So that is about hallucinations. Then delusions are simply false beliefs. Remember I said schizophrenia is characterized by two major symptoms, hallucinations and delusions. Now delusions are simply false beliefs. This person firmly believes that they are Jesus, and there is nothing you will tell them to convince them otherwise. Or they firmly believe that the CIA has planted a device in their brain. And these are things that we see every day. Or they firmly believe that they are being watched. So they'll constantly be paranoid. So that is schizophrenia in a nutshell. It's one of the most complicated disorders. Just to go a little bit on treatment, again, it's a condition that like Gilbert said earlier, it can be genetically predisposed. It can be due to environment. There is no one specific factor that causes schizophrenia, but it involves a depletion of some brain chemicals that are used for normal everyday living. And one is put on medication to try and balance the chemical imbalance in the brain.
So just to know that I've been vindicated with schizophrenia, and I think it's because I can use my words correctly. I said schizophrenia, is it something to do with listening? And actually they have said there's audio involved and there's also visual involved. So guys, I didn't get it wrong. If you are the marking scheme, you are giving me 0.5 for trying. Nyokabi Kamau, I think one thing that stands out in the presentation that the gentlemen have made, that it's all these things relate to how we relate to ourselves, first of all, and of course the environment around us and the people for that matter. Do you think, or do you believe that the way people formulate relationships, and I want to actually put in the relationship perspective, do you think it can lead to a possible mental health disorder? Nyokabi, let me just do my thing. Okay, go ahead.
Lukuyani, to answer your question, yes and no. I'm going to say yes and no in the sense that some of these disorders are medically, they are medical. Yani you're either, I don't want to say you're born with them, but you can find yourself with that condition of the mental illness. You see, me as a psychologist today, I have to be very careful with the way I present my arguments. So in one part, the 50 part of it is that you can find yourself, you've been born with it, or you have it's a condition. It's a mental condition, it's a family thing, you've inherited it, or maybe. Now, to come to the relationship bit, people who have grown up being abused, more often than not, they develop a mental illness, which can be depression, which can be anxiety out of the fear of being punished and being beaten. People who have been heartbroken and did not go through the process of heartbreak, they did not process what happened to them, they also are likely to develop a mental illness, which is also anxiety, depression, and mostly anxiety and depression, and sometimes personality disorder. Sometimes you can be able to flip from personality disorders if you get into a relationship where you don't know what this person wants, you are in love with this person. So you're trying to be nice, then you realize they don't like you nice. Then you try to be a bad boy, then you realize they don't like the bad boy. So you end up having a personality challenge here, trying to flip sides to accustom to what the other person wants. So yes, it can go both ways. depending on how you are brought up, how are your parents, how do they treat you? Do they allow you to express yourself? Did they allow you to be yourself? Did they allow your personality to grow? Did they break your spirit, or did they discipline you? All those lines play a very key role in how a person's mental health is. All right?
Yep.
Did they help you to process issues? You know, there are parents who, when something bad happens to you, they tell you, wake up and wash yourself, right? And brush off the whatever has happened to you. They don't allow you to process what has happened to you. So they are accustoming your mind, not processing grief, not processing pain, not processing heartbreak. Sawa sawa. So they are teaching you a certain way of dealing with things that isn't proper, that is not complete. It has a short somewhere. So when you're able to complete something, and that's what Gilbert was saying, the state of being, the state of well-being, when you're able to process something with your mind completely and go through it properly, then your mental state is healthy. Let me put it this way. If today I decided to be eating KFC every day, sorry to use KFC as an example, right?
Yeah, they didn't pay for the advert, but it's okay.
Yes, every single day I decided to be eating, let me use the word junk food. If I decided to be eating junk food every day, I'm eating deep fried food with cheese and with whatever. In the process, what's going to happen to me? My body is going to lose the nutrition that it needs. It's going to become bulky, it's going to become heavy, and I'm likely to tip over to the side of obesity, because what I'm eating is not helping my body. It's not nutritious to my body. It's not adding any value to my body. Yes, I'm full. Yes, I'm not hungry. I'm meeting the hunger bit, but I'm not full. I'm not flourishing the body. I'm not giving the body the nutrients that it needs. It's the same thing about mental well-being and mental wellness. Mental wellness is the state of allowing your mind to feed on the things that it needs to feed. And one of those things is developing your EQ, emotional intelligence, processing things to the letter, from the start of when it happens to you all the way to the end. And some of these things are taken away from us when we are children. When you're growing up, like for me, crying in our house was a crime. What are you crying about? If you're in pain, you are asked, who is the doctor in this house? So you learned you accustom yourself to, you accustom yourself to pain. And even right now, as a grown-up, if I'm in pain, you can never tell. I'll never tell you I'm in pain. And if I'm going to the hospital, you be rest assured I'll be admitted, because I did not learn how to process these things, and to tell me, when my mind tells me, Nyokabi, you're not feeling well, I don't respond properly, because I've fed it the wrong way. So I'll end up either having hot flashes or collapsing somewhere, and people will rush me to the hospital. But you see, it didn't happen to me overnight. It's been something I've been feeling and ignoring. So the lack of attention to that thing that's affecting you, the lack of attention of processing that thing that is affecting you, can lead you into a mental illness more often than not, right? And as James was saying, the stigma of mental illness, like now we have a pandemic of depression. Everybody is going through depression one way or another, whether it's severe or it's minor or it's chronic. It doesn't matter. Somebody is going through a state of depression, a state of wondering, that hopelessness, that wondering, sasa hii life, sasa hii COVID, sasa hii kazi, sasa hii, that's all you're thinking about. You're not thinking about anything else. But because of the stigma, nobody's seeking help. Nobody's talking to anybody. Nobody's saying, hey, by the way, I've been processing this thing. I've been going through this phase. If you don't pay attention to that particular emotion that's disturbing the way you do, the way you run about your daily life, then it is more likely to develop into an illness than not.
Great. Nyokabi, you've covered it well. And I think this is partially what we say, the factors that can contribute to mental unwellness. And probably I'll bring in Gilbert. Gilbert, if we want to look at the factors that can contribute, and you say some of them could be biological or even physical, what role then does family or society play in the wellness of men mentally? The role of society.
Family comes in the part of environment. This is what surrounds us. This is society, is where we are in daily. The norms and the setup and the weather, everything we do now around us. Now it determines who we are. So we have to tread with what surrounds us very cautiously, because it determines, like, the pressure around you. It either pushes you to be the best or it pushes you to the wall. So as men, what is happening around us will always determine the impact we feel. And the impact we feel in our body now, it's what can I say? It's how we take it as men. It's how you absorb in the pressure. Because we said for you to be sound mentally is when there is that positive well-being. But when you are faced with challenges and when you are faced with pressure, how do you take the pressure? The way you take the pressure determines how you'll fight back. It's either you respond in positively or you realize, because now what is happening like currently in our society is, as Nyokabi has said, there is a lot of pressure around us, caused with what we have gone through for the past 1 year. How are we approaching that pressure? How are we taking it in? Are we fighting reality? Are we living in denial?
There's that question on the screen, Gilbert, if you want to respond to it.
Responding to life is mental health genetic. Yeah. Mental illness, not mental health. As I said, as we were starting the show, mental health is the state of well-being. But whenever there is a challenge, I don't like saying a problem, whenever there is a challenge to this state of well-being, that is now where the mental health, the mental illness comes in. And I said it can be because of environment, because of the biological way we are set up, because of circumstances we've gone through in life. So there are those mental illness that are from the family. You can like, for example, you can say in this family they have a problem of bipolar. And then you find it running in the family, though I cannot authoritatively put my words on it, but it can be genetical. It can run in the family. That's why we need to diagnose and know how to handle it. Because there are several names within our environment, like in Kenya now, there are several people who have come out and talked about their mental illness, who has even taken keen interest in it. No, and because we don't know. I've had very high position people talking about their mental health. And if you can trace their actions, you can link it, their mental illness, to the actions they have taken. But no one has even followed up to see, why has this person behaving so? Because people will always run to say, maybe I could depressed. And they assume other forms of mental illness until it's diagnosable, until someone realizes this is what I'm suffering from.
Great. Hezbollah, sorry. There was sorry, Gilbert, I was to say this. You have mentioned about everything to deal with that. However, we need to go back to the roots. And sometimes people will just say, yeah, we are amichizi. And that's what, in a slang word that initially James put up. But James, what are these common signs that we can look out for to tell that somebody could possibly be suffering from mental illness or mental disorder? And I want you to focus mostly, it's general, yes, but in men specifically. James, if you can take that again, please.
Sorry.
The common mental disorders. Yeah.
No, let me allow, I wanted to say, I hope you can allow me a minute or two to just, again, in response to all that has been asked and we've been discussing about, if I can trace two scenarios to paint a picture of what actually happens in a human being. And I say this because there has been a viewer who has asked whether mental health disorders or illnesses are genetic. And also we have, in this discussion, we have said there are other mental disorders that are not genetic, or you are not born with, but you end up having a mental disorder. So I wanted to paint a scenario. So number one, we need to understand when we talk about the role of genetics. If, for example, your family, in your family, there are issues of depression, there is a likelihood that you are born with a predisposition. Now, it's important to understand that being predisposed does not necessarily mean that you have depression. It just means that you are more likely to develop depression than a person who was not predisposed. So you carry a genetic factor that would make you more susceptible to the mental disorder than a person who is not predisposed. So let's take the instance of somebody who is born with a predisposition to a mental illness. Now, the role of society, psychosocial environment, the role of the family and upbringing, developmental, all those bring about either one to be resilient or not. For example, again, and I want to trace a line of depression so that we can see how it finally ends. So, for example, you come from Nyokabi's family where when you cry, you're told there's no doctor in this house. Nyokabi will allow me to use you.
Yeah, it's a very good classical example.
Assuming you come from this, assuming you come from this family, you're already predisposed, but then the environment you're growing up in starts teaching you that you do not talk about problems. Yeah. So what happens is pressure starts building up. I would also like to invite everybody to read on a theory that we normally refer to called the Erik Erikson psychosocial theory of development, where it divides a person's growing up and how each stage affects them later on in life. Yeah. So you come from this family where you're told you do not talk, so you are developing all these pressures and your ability, again, it's like a bottle. You can only put in so much. What most people do, the most common is you will find a negative coping mechanism. Now, when we come specifically to men, the most negative coping mechanism that we get engaged in is substance use and later abuse. Yeah. So you find that you are genetically predisposed to depression. Your society, the society you grow up in, does not teach you how to deal with your pressures and with the pressures. And then later on in life, you discover one bottle of liquor makes me sleep, for example, or relieves my pressure. So what happens is you pick that negative coping mechanism and you run with it. So before long, you are initially predisposed to depression, you develop a substance use disorder. So you develop an addiction, in short. So now you're dealing with depression and you're using alcohol to self-medicate the depression. So before long, you can't cope without the substance. Ultimately, if no help is found for you, and by help I mean medical intervention, the most likely sequence will be fatal. So you will either die or it's fatal. Yeah. Now that is somebody who is already predisposed. Look at it the other way around. Somebody who has been born without any predisposition. And I want us to see how you can create, because not everybody is born with a predisposition. So this person has been born without any predisposition. Again, I refer people to the Erik Erikson psychosocial theory of development. You are born, but the society you grow up in teaches you either not to trust people, to internalize fear, to internalize anxieties. So you grow up in this environment that does not allow you to express yourself, express your emotions. And I agree 110% with Nyokabi that emotions are one of the biggest triggers to mental illnesses. Yeah. So you grow up internalizing all these negative emotions. But then again, just like the earlier case, you can only take in so much. So you'll get to a point where you are so stressed that your brain starts malfunctioning, for lack of a better word. Yeah. The same with burnout, for example. If you drive yourself too hard, your body will shut down eventually. If you work too hard, you're not resting, you're not giving yourself a break, your body will shut down. The same thing with mental illnesses. You grow up in too much pressure, too much anxiety, too much fear. The body starts producing less or more of certain brain chemicals that again predispose you to mental illnesses. Yeah. So you can either be born with genetic predisposition to mental illnesses, or environments and events in your life can cause you to develop a mental illness. Now, again, coming back to your specific question, there is some of these common symptoms of mental illness. And again, I want to specifically focus on men. Nyokabi.
Yes, Nyokabi, raise her hand.
Yeah, thank you. Just to go with your flow, James, I'm curious to ask, because I normally teach a lot about personality traits, and personality, personalities have their positives and their negatives. And there are two particular personalities that are prone to depression. And I wanted to hear what is your perspective on that. Melancholics and phlegmatics, they are more prone to depression because they overthink and they overprocess, and they get very affected by very small things because of their personality. So I don't know whether you can link that to the same as you are linking the predisposition of genetic, I don't know. How would you look at that, you yourself?
Okay, James, you can take that one.
Thanks, Nyokabi. Again, you're pushing me. This again a whole different branch of it. Yeah. Because when we look at personality now, especially in terms of, my mind is tuned. I'm trained to look at disorders, so you'll forgive me. When you talk about personality disorders, again, we look at two clusters. Cluster A and cluster B of personality. Yeah, cluster A is more of the schizoid personality types. Yeah, again, that is pure chemical deficiency. Cluster A. So you'll find schizophrenic personalities. I'm coming to where you're coming. I'm coming. I know where you're going. You're going to.
Okay, you know what? You guys can take one-on-one. Let's do this for them. It's easier. Let them take one.
Okay, no, let me just allow me, Ellie, to just give the symptoms. Then let me just give the symptoms where we had left off. Ellie,
kindly proceed.
Okay, Nyokabi, I'll come back to you in our own session. Now, you had asked about some of the recognizable symptoms that would be used to know that one has a mental illness or mental disorder. And I want to focus primarily on men. Nyokabi is making us lose track that this is a man's show. Now, for men, it's very complicated. Again, I want to run with depression because depression is what most of us think they know. Now, the most obvious and common symptoms of depression that everybody knows include feelings of worthlessness, feelings of hopelessness, instability, and all that. Personality that is just beaten. But then now I want to turn the tables round, because very many men, are suffering from depression, but we turn around and wonder, we didn't see these symptoms. But then we need to understand that the symptoms for depression, especially between men and women, are very different. And this is something that we're coming to recognize lately. Yeah. Number one, somebody who is depressed in men, you'll find a lot of aggression. There'll be a lot of aggression. There'll be a lot of irritability. There'll be a lot of anger outbursts. There'll be isolation. There will be withdrawal from things that they loved doing. Now, these are not the classic symptoms of depression. So, in fact, if anything, they look manly, quote unquote. So they escape the radar. Yeah. Very many men will be depressed, but we do not recognize it because the symptoms they are presenting are not the classical symptoms of what we are accustomed to. And this is why it's important to keep on revising the symptoms that we know because they keep on changing. Again, everything is dynamic. As we evolve, even the symptoms evolve. Yeah. So for men, especially, any deviation from who the person was initially, that's the safest bet. Any deviation, somebody who was jolly and outgoing, all of a sudden they are very irritable, they're not sleeping, they loved soccer, they're no longer interested. And that's why, again, like Jikaze was saying, some men will look happy day one, and then the following day you find they have murdered the whole family and committed suicide. And we wonder as a society, what happened? Yeah. But if we are careful, the symptoms are always there.
I know you want to, your cab is really interested in the personalities that exist, the melancholic and the other ones. But I will allow James to respond to that at a later stage. But then again, there's something interesting that James has mentioned, and I want to engage a little bit of Gilbert and you, Nyokabi. Let me ask this, Gilbert. There's a classical example of what happened in Kenya, that a young man went on a rampage and literally murdered the whole family. Everybody will say this is some sort of spirit and a movie kind of influence. But do you think there is reason to question the mental capacity of this young person? And and if so, how then do we help young people that could possibly be going through this sort of problem? Gilbert.
Thank you, Eli. As I said earlier on, for me, I love being consistent so that I don't get lost along the way. I said the society that we live in has subjected us to judgment and has negated science. So we go ahead to judge faster than we diagnose. The first thing the judge will do, whether you think they did it knowing or unknowing, they'll want to question your sanity. That's why whether they are sure or not, they'll have to send you to be assessed. And that is the right procedure. But the mass will not do that. The mass are brutal. They will judge you. So we go with what the mass always, mostly people go with what the mass is saying. But how many of us are patient enough to allow the professional do their job? They have said, this is now the third time, the young man is not ready to face trial because he's still not stable. They are still saying his mental state is not okay, but the mass will not allow that. These are the things that are happening to our society. People are going through different challenges, but you see the society is ready to judge you and hit you back. Instead of embracing you and saying, this is what you are going through. How can we help you as a society? So most probably, as we said, environment and people surrounding us, what surrounds us matters a lot. Are you getting the support? Are these young men in Kenya getting the support? Are men getting that support from the society? No. The way our society is made, we judge before we listen. And that's why there are rising number of cases, people doing unholy things. And we just pass a judgment. This is mad. This one was intentional. Because from the few stories I've heard, this has happened in the family line. It has not been authenticated, but when you hear something like that, if you're a professional, what do you ask yourself? coming back to what Ellie said, you might be predisposed and you don't know. This thing happened in your line, on a lineage. Someone did that. They had that problem. And as I said, the biological part of it is not given that concentration. People base on the environmental ones, but what about the biological ones? You have tendencies that show this particular type of signs, but no one has diagnosed to be sure that, for example, Ellie is suffering from schizophrenia, or Ellie is suffering from bipolar. So Ellie comes out and do something very strange, and people will say all manner of things, because first of all, they don't have the information. They don't have the knowledge. And I love what James said in our previous show. Even doctors, even the professionals in the field, how have we equipped the professional to identify these types of mental illness amongst our society? Because if they are not identified, people will crop up doing crazy stuff of things, but no one is there to identify. No one is there to educate the society. These are the challenges, and this is how you go through these challenges. This is how you fight the challenges that are facing you. So when we lack that society support, when men lack that society support, when men lack that knowledge, you might be suffering, but you don't know what you are suffering from. So you keep on doing things that you don't know. You just find yourself in delusion.
Yeah.
But you don't know why you are always delusional.
Right. Nyokabi, you deal with adolescents in your line of duty. And a classical example, without really mentioning the merits or demerits of this case because it's in court, what would you say that could be one of the reasons probably behind this, without really giving speculations? But as an adolescent, you're a parent. Do you think it is also time to evaluate your child and make sure that the environment they are growing in does not predispose them to such kind of probably activities that could lead to such incidences?
Thank you, Ellie, for that wonderful question, because it comes back to what I wanted James to really get into as a psychologist. Because when I talk about personalities, I wasn't necessarily talking about the personality disorders. I was talking about personality traits. What kind of a person are you? Because in order for this person to be able to help this person, or to realize that there's a change in their behavior, you need to know how they normally behave, what is termed as normal, what is termed, because their personality, like I said, like melancholics, there are people who are withdrawn, there are people who are always anxious about things, there are people who always see the end of the world, everything, they always see half a cup, they never see full cup, they never see the good thing in anything. So this kind of people who are going through such kind of situations, and that's their personality, and they are more prone to depression. How do you help them as a family member? How do you help them as a member of the, because when I look at this boy, I see a quiet boy. I see a person who is very withdrawn. So I would classify you as a male something else. So this person is going through some emotions and they're not able to express them and to talk about them. And they're not able to deal with a particular feeling, right? If they feel angry, they're not able to process that anger. If they feel pain, they're not able to feel that pain. And that's why James said that you develop an unhealthy adaptive method of dealing with it. So for him, he didn't choose a substance to abuse. He chose to take out the entire problem and wipe it out, and it made sense to him at that time. And that's why Gilbert is saying that the ideal situation would have been for professionals to come together and speak to this child and find out what's going on, and even speak to family members and relatives and find out at what point did the temperament of this person change? At what point did the behavior of this person change? What happened to this person that caused the change in behavior? What triggered? that reaction in his brain? What triggered for him to produce those hormones that resulted in that kind of rage? Because you need to be in a particular state of mind to be able to perform such a heinous crime. You can't be, I don't believe a person who is in a stable state of mind can be able to perform that kind of a crime. Something must have gone, some wires must have gone loose. Sorry, James. Kuna circuit ili short. So at what point did that circuit short happen? At what point did this person change from this particular person and become who they were at that moment? And even right now, as they're evaluating this person, what help are they giving him? Are they focusing on the crime itself and not focusing on the boy himself and trying to find out what's happening with him and how can they help him? Because even that act itself is traumatizing for him. His life will never be the same. His mind will never be the same. You know, those actions will always go with him. That picture will always, unless he's a psychopath, that picture will always be in his mind. So how are we helping him? And I like that it's men who are talking about this mental illness. It's men who are sharing about this mental illness. And the reason why I was coming to you, James, on this point is men are quiet. Men are withdrawn. Men don't like talking. And if they talk, they get stigmatized. They are told wewe unapiga kelele sana, wanaume hawaongeangi hivyo. So men are pushed to the personality of quietness, withdrawn, and not dealing with things and passive about issues of life. So when you talk about being predisposed to genetic and being predisposed to mental illness, can also your personality as a person, if you're a withdrawn person, if you're a quiet person, if you're a person who does not like confrontations, because most men do not like confrontations, and dealing with emotions require confrontations. That is why women mkitukasirisha, we wear our gym bags na tunavaa gloves and we go to war. We'll deal with you proper with the SMSs, with the emails, with the messages. We go to war. We are in the ring. We deal with the emotions. But men, sasa ikitokea vita, you're like, okay, it was not that serious. You understand what I'm saying? So how do we help these young men, these teenagers, these youth who are they're angry at their parents because ameambiwa akuje mapema na anaona yeye ni mwanaume na unamwambia akuje mapema na ni mama yake anamwambia akuje mapema. Sasa anashindwa sasa, huyu mama, I'm taller than you, I'm bigger than you. So they are going through that phase of trying to understand society and life itself. When they lose something, when they lose a loved one, then they lose a parent, how are they supposed to process these emotions? When the girlfriend they thought they would spend the rest of their lives with them, amechukuliwa na sponsor na ameenda. Men become resentful and they become angry. Men are angry because their fathers are not present in their lives. These are the mental wellness that I thought we would be addressing. You know, we would be talking about the real issues that men are facing and they are suffering in silence. How do we help these guys who are in that state to process these emotions so that they can maintain a healthy state of mind, to avoid them reacting the way they are reacting? How could have this boy dealt with situations other than committing murder?
Yep.
You know,
and I think Nyokabe, you just brought in a bigger idea into this. I would love for us to answer these questions in the next session where we address mental health in men and how best can we help these young people suffering. We have 2 minutes to the close of the show. So very quickly, James, because Nyokabe gave you a challenge that you have to answer a few questions, and I would like for you to take them next week. But tonight, as we conclude, what are your giveaways to the audience? Okay, go ahead.
Nyokabe is firing questions. Fire. Okay. Again, as I wrap up, I agree with you, Nyokabe. There are some personality traits that are more prone to mental health issues than others. That's number one. Number two, no child is the same to the other. And it's the role of the parents to identify each child and their uniqueness and treat them accordingly. I say this because you bring out the issue of this melancholic child who is withdrawn and internalizes and wants to ruminate through his thoughts and how we can help such a child. any child, irrespective of their personality traits, requires a few things. Number one is trust, to feel that they can trust their family and their parents, and they can be trusted. Number two is to be reassured that irrespective of whatever happens, they will always have a place. Number three is to be heard. Yeah, you know the way a child will talk and you shut them down. You know, you should not talk when adults are talking. That's how we shut them until they're adults. Yeah. So each child will be given the space to thrive dependent on their personality traits. Why do I say this? Why do I bring this? Because it is not, while we can say that there are some personality traits that are more prone to mental illnesses, like melancholic, for example, it is not all melancholics who end up having mental illnesses. So it is how we nurture. And this one I put squarely on the family of creation, the immediate caregiver. Again,
thank you, James. Thank you, James. I believe we honestly ran out of time for this show. However, I want us to discuss this more next week. Let's allow Gilbert to give his closing remark. Gilbert, go ahead.
Thank you, Eli. To be cognizant of time, to add on what James just said, I think we need to create now a society that is aware of what is happening. Awareness, awareness, awareness. I believe there are enough professionals in the field. Let them be given space to practice. Let the society be made aware of what mental health is and what mental illness is. I think that's the way. If the society is aware, we'll fight it with knowledge. Thank you.
Fighting it with knowledge. Jikaze, I know you have a lot of questions and answers that have been not addressed. Kindly give your closing remark.
My closing remarks would be, I'm so excited, by the way, that it's men who are handling this issue of health, mental health in men. Because when a man hears it from another man, they are more likely to, they see the logic behind it. Because if a woman speaks about it, they'll see the emotion behind it. But if it's a man who is speaking, they see the logic and they can be able to understand and even to realize that. I like that we are creating a space where men are realizing it's okay to be in tune with your emotions. If you take nothing out of this session, please take the fact that it's okay to be in tune with your emotions. There are two major emotions that you need to be okay with: happiness and sadness, because they shape you, they make you who you are. They determine the moods you're in, they determine the way you respond to things, they determine even the way you perform in terms of business, in terms of home and family values, in terms of everything, including achievements and success. Those two emotions play a very key role in your life. If men can embrace these emotions, to be angry, to be upset, to be hurt, to be joyful, to be excited. It's okay to be excited about the person you're in love with. It's okay to be excited about having a new baby. It's okay to be excited, about issues of life. If you can embrace these emotions and you can learn how to process them properly in a healthy way without adapting a negative way of dealing with those emotions, then I believe that we'll eradicate mental illness completely. And we'll have more sober people, more people who are in tune with their emotions. And by the way, coming from a lady, I value a man who is in tune with the emotions. I like a man who tells me, Jikaze, there you have hurt me. I don't do that again. I like a man who tells me, hey, woman, you disappoint. You should have come. I was expecting you. I was excited to see you. I like a man who is in tune with his emotions because I can relate. And it gives us a point of connection. I don't see it as a weakness, personally. So, gentlemen, stop thinking that when you're in tune with your emotions, we feel that you're weak or you're not. That vulnerability brings a connection between two people that is just an interesting bond. Ellie.
Connection is what you're talking about, and next week on this same show, I want us to address those matters, especially in young children that eventually end up being Baba Nani who has no feelings, and mostly men have been accused of such. So in case you didn't know, boy child has been under CAK for too long, and that is one of the reasons we are discussing mental wellness in men. Next week, same place, same time, catch us as we discuss further into this topic. It's been a pleasure having you, lady and gentlemen, on board tonight. And of course, tomorrow I have Nyokabi Kamau, who is a relationship coach, to be discussing matters that actually affect men. And this is masturbation. Be in tune because it's going to be fire. She says it as it is. Until next time, I've been your host, Likuyani Eli, and it's a wrap. Good night. Nyokabi Kamau tells me it is the Victoria Falls secrets.
If you have not invested in a proper sexual toy, please do not improvise.
You never know, because at the end of the day, it's about making the fingers do the walking. Sorry, is it the talking?
It's the walking.
So I'll talk on behalf of the girls who are in the rural Kakamega, who don't know what it is, and they go to church and they're told this is a sin.
Most funny thing about sex is the one thing that you're taught not to do since you're a small girl. And then when you get married, everybody is telling you, go ahead and do that bad thing.